Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
Okay, so it's a perfect illustration that you just don't know when. So, okay, we're in the book of Acts still. FriendshipGraceBrethren.com documents the gospel to the Gentiles. We've made it to the end of chapter 9 this morning. We begin in 19 as we look at, that's probably not right. That's not right. We made it to the gospel to the Gentiles, the end of chapter 9, verse 32. I knew it wasn't right. 32, it says right there, 32. As the Apostle Paul, not yet an apostle, but as he begins to, or as his confrontation of the church is gone, and he now begins to move out into the apostolic world. So the gospel to the Gentiles, chapter 9, verse 32. Now as Peter went here and there among them all, he came down also to the saints who lived in Lydda. There he found a man named Ananias, bedridden for 8 years, who was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Ananias, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. And immediately he rose. And all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. The town of Lydda is somewhere in this region. Don't know specifically where. It's one of those that we have reference to, but we don't have specific direct information of. This is called the Plain of Sharon. It would be today in the Gaza Strip. Tel Aviv would, here's Caesarea. Tel Aviv would be right here, Tel Aviv. So this is Israel here, and then this is Gaza. Well, maybe not. Maybe Gaza's the other side. Yeah, Egypt. So it'd be on the other side of Tel Aviv. Yeah. I need to wake up. I'll do that after about 5 or more cups of coffee. This is in the Old Testament, we see David talking about the Plain of Sharon. That's this coastal plain that's lush, beautiful area. But at the time of Jesus, it was heavily occupied by Gentiles. It was not just a Jewish enclave. It was heavily occupied by Gentiles. So Dr. Luke is telling the story now, beginning to talk about the spread of the gospel to Gentiles, and Peter finds himself in a Gentile area in Egypt. I'm in Egypt. Hello. Did you give me caffeine free this morning? You sure? But you filled it, so you sure? When she filled it? From my bag and not from some other bag? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it feels like that. Peter was last seen in Acts chapter 8, verse 35, as he and John were returning to Jerusalem from Samaria. And that was about 3 years earlier, so that we have a time lapse in here in appearances of Peter. Lydda is in this region. Perhaps the city of Lod that is in this region, which was one of the Philistine cities That was what I believed when I wrote this. I don't know that that's true anymore. Some more research, at least on my part, may put that into question. If it is Lod, it is where the international airport, the Tel Aviv Jerusalem airport, is in the region today. While in Lydda, Peter comes across Aeneas, who was paralyzed for 8 years. Peter healed him in the name of Jesus the Messiah. I love the way Peter states it. Jesus Christ heals you. And you almost want to superimpose in the text, so get up and make your bed. Jesus heals you, so get up and get going. Is kind of the sense of what we see in the text. Go on to verse 36. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. Like that helps you, right? She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died, and when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, urging him, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter rose and went to them, and when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed, and turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, arise." And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and the widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And he stayed in Joppa for many days with one Simon, a tanner. So, while Peter's in Lydda, a Christian woman in Joppa by the name of Dorcas died. She gave to the poor regularly and was well known. 2 men were sent to Lydda to get Peter. Joppa was, we believe, about 12 miles from where we believe Lydda may have been. What the disciples in Joppa wanted Peter to do is not specified. It's not like they came and said, "We want you to raise her from the dead," or "We want you to preach her funeral." We just know that they went and got Peter. We don't know why. So far in Acts, no resurrection other than Jesus has been documented. When Peter arrived in Joppa, he was shown the body of many, or by many. I don't know what I wrote there. He was shown the body by many of the woman. Commas are a wonderful thing. Who were mourning. These women also showed Peter the articles of clothing that Dorcas had made for them. This was a way of reflecting to Peter how important and special Dorcas was to the people of Joppa. Peter asked for everyone to leave the room where the body was so he could pray. He knelt beside the body and prayed. Then the remarkable happened. Peter turned to the body and told her to get up. She opened her eyes and sat up. Then he called other believers and presented to them the living Dorcas. So, how would you explain this miracle? No, I gave you that part. How would you explain it? Say what? Correct. Say that again? Certainly a measure of faith is part of this, yes. Faith, prayer, and resurrection. Say it again, Esther. To show other people, that's a good reason, yes. Yeah. When you look at the world with the understanding of the creator, sustainer of the universe, Raising someone from the dead is not a big deal. He gives life, he takes life, but he can give it back again. Now, she was not resurrected to a glorified body. She was like Lazarus. She's, going to be in the Lazarus Club, who has to die again. But she now is in this small club of people raised from the dead. As with other miracles, this resulted in many coming to know the Lord and the word of the gospel message spreading throughout the region. So Peter raises her, or Peter calls on Jesus to raise her, and she rises from the dead, and message begins to flow out, and people start to hear. Who else hears when good things like that happen? Yeah. And we're going to begin to see more oppression come down on the church, because this is in Jerusalem's backyard, and the leadership is going to start taking more notice of all of this. Yeah. And I didn't anticipate in raising him from the dead. I don't know if Peter did anticipate raising him from the dead. And it would become a spectacle if the room was filled. And with the room not filled, it's not as much a spectacle of how it happened, but who did it. I don't know why he sent him out. Jesus didn't when he raised Lazarus, right? He's standing at the door of the tomb, and everybody that's mourning and weeping and wailing and so forth, he just says, Lazarus, come forth. So an intimate time for Peter and Jesus before Dorcas is raised. I don't know. It's an interesting question, one that we can't answer from the text. I went back and looked at the text. There's just nothing that would give you a. He put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. Could be, but then the other side of that coin is he didn't do that with Lazarus. So. Well, he wasn't any percent God. I don't know. It's an interesting thought that I can honestly say I never thought before. And probably none of you did either. Well, that's what Brian's saying. I would think that would work in the reverse. If people are there, they'll hear me praying to Jesus. If they're not there, I can come out and say, look what I did. And that didn't happen, so go ahead. Yeah, That's the most logical, probably. That. I don't know. That's an interesting question. Let's move on to chapter 10, verse 1. At Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion, what was known as the Italian cohort. I love the town of Caesarea. Caesarea Maritima was the right on the coast, north of that region, north of the coast of, or the plain of Sharon. It was the Roman headquarters of oversight in that region of the Levant. Today, you can still go to the Roman theater that sits right on the coast of the Sea of Galilee. We believe the same place that Herod would later die, be eaten by worms. A fantastic engineering feat. You can stand, the marble floor is still there, and there are sections of it that are different colors, and you can stand on those and be heard just talking in normal voice without electronics, be heard in all the seats, and there's probably enough space for 2,000 or 3,000 people. On the floor, there's a wall where the seats come up, and you can, in a semicircle, how typical Roman theaters are, there are cutouts in different places on the front of that little wall, and you can stand in front of one of them and whisper, and 200 or 300 feet across the stage on the other side, hear the whisper. The engineering, you still do it today, and that's how the theater worked in Roman times. You could stand on a black stone and everybody could hear you. You could move a foot and stand on a white stone and nobody could hear you. It's just amazing. And that exists today. You can go there today. Yep. And the stands overlook the beach of the Mediterranean Sea. It's a gorgeous place. Peter goes up to Caesarea, where a man named Cornelius, a centurion, was what was known as the Italian cohort. The Italian cohort is an interesting Italian regiment from the Roman army. Extra biblical record of an Italian regiment being stationed in Syria between AD 67 and AD 157. Now this predates this by 30 years, 25 years or so. But the extra biblical record we have talks about the Italian cohort. And that area would have been called Syria at the time. The Italian regiment was made up of men recruited from Italy who were most likely Roman citizens. Extra biblical records reflect the size of the Italian regiment was 6 centuries with 100 men per century, so 600 men, each commanded by a centurion. It was also customary that the senior centurion to be in charge of the entire regiment with the additional title of primus pilus, or first spear. There was a series on, I think, HBO for a while of First Spear, and it was all about the inside politics of a Roman legion, and whoever would be the top dog, and they were killing out the other ones so they could be the first spear. And we believe that's what Cornelius was. He was either the centurion over the 100, or he was the first spear over all of the regiment. A pretty important position for that region. First of all, being Italian, they were, and Roman citizens, they were a special force that was sent there by I almost said Pope, by the Emperor In a few years, they would call him Pope. By the emperor to maintain control even of the politicians. So Cornelius, if he was the first spear, he was the guy that would have the ability to take out Pilate. If the emperor, if Nero had said, yeah, Pilate's just not doing it anymore, they would send the Italian cohort down. They were kind of the special forces, reported directly back to the emperor. This is not just a Roman legion. This is the special forces operating at the behest of the emperor, doing the emperor's bidding. So Herod and Pilate had to fear this guy. This guy was an important guy because he was the extension of the power of the emperor there in the Holy Land. Verse 2, a devout man who feared God with all his household gave alms generously to the people and prayed continually to God. That's Cornelius. Named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known as the Italian cohort, a devout man who feared God with all his household, gave alms generously to the people, and prayed continuously to God. What's the problem with that? What's that? Well, true, he kills people. But what's the real problem? Well, okay, I'm a Gentile. Yeah. Yeah. What does Dr. Luke mean when he says he's a devout man? He's a follower of at least Jehovah God. He probably doesn't yet understand Jesus. But this is a guy that's converted to the faith of the enemy. He's the first spear in Israel who has adopted their religion. Kind of. Certainly Rome would look at that way. Because like Ann said, by this time the emperor had become a god. And so it was very difficult. You didn't worship the emperor alone. You had all the other kinds of gods, right? Now he's become devout to Jehovah God. And that could cause all sorts of problems. It also places somebody very important at a great position in the church. No, that happened often. Yeah, was it permissible? No. Did they say anything? Probably not. Yeah. I mean, we do that in our own politics today. I mean, just ask Hillary. Say that again? Sure. Caesarea Maritima. Caesarea Philippi is northeast, and this is right on the coast of the Mediterranean. And Caesarea, what does Caesarea sound like? Caesar. It was named after Caesar, because we know that was the Roman headquarters. Do we know it from the text? No. We know it from what we know of extra biblical. And from other places in the text, we're told they go up to Caesarea and then sail. You don't sail from Caesarea Philippi unless it's a little tiny boat on a little pond. That's how we know that. So he's a devout man now, which gives us the indication that he's turned to follow at least Judaism, and we'll see more in the coming paragraphs. About the 9th hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God come in and say to him, Cornelius. I'm trembling in my boots if this happens to me. I just want you to know that. Nice and windy. And he stared at him in terror and said, What is it, Lord? And he said to him, Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. And now send men to Joppa and bring one Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon a tanner, whose house is by the sea. A couple of things there. We saw earlier that Peter was staying with Simon a tanner. Was that what a good Jewish boy could do? No. What's a tanner? He operates tanning beds, right? Right. He is the guy that skins animals and processes the leather. What's the problem with that for a good Jewish boy? It's unclean, absolutely. So, if Simon was in fact a Jew, the process for him to go to the temple would be extreme, because he was always ceremonially unclean. And Peter was staying with him. And Peter prided himself, and this might be why he was staying with him, prided himself of not putting himself in a place where he is unclean. Now we see more about Cornelius. And he stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" Don't interpret Lord here as a spiritual description. That would be the same as saying Mr. or Sir. Okay, in our vernacular today. What is it, sir? That doesn't ascribe any deity to him. That is just a sign of respect. And the word used there, that's what it means. Your prayers and alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa. Go back to this one, to verse 3. Clearly in a vision. We'll see this repeated a few times in our text. 3 o'clock was a normal Jewish time of the day to pray. We have no indication that Cornelius was praying at the time he was approached, just that it's consistent with the custom and practice of the day. Cornelius sees a vision of an angel of God. We've already seen that vision does not exclude the actual sight of something physically being present. Vision is used to signify that this was a supernatural event, but still a real event, not a dream. He's not sleeping and he sees this dream. I'm blessed. I don't remember most of my dreams, but sometimes I'm told that, or I've experienced them where they feel really real. That's not what's being described here. He didn't go asleep and dream he saw somebody and get afraid in his dream. He didn't have a nightmare, or a nightmare, as Caitlin used to call it. Vision describes actually seeing something, like vision. The angel or the messenger was sent by God to give Cornelius a message. He was to send for Simon, who is called Peter, in Joppa, who is staying with Simon the tanner in a house by the sea. A very specific set of instructions. Cornelius was given by God, and I believe by Jesus Christ directly, a vision, a set of instructions. Do this. Why did God send an angel as his messenger? An angle? An angle. Everybody's a critic. Yeah, I struggle with commas today, that's true. Why did God send an angel, not an angle, or an angel with an angle? Say that again? Versus Jesus, I suppose. No, this is after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection and ascension. Untrue. Yeah. No, he came back after he ascended too. We went through this a couple weeks ago. When Paul is on the road to Damascus, he's confronted by the risen Jesus. This was after Jesus' ascension, 2 or 3 years after. Ananias in Damascus is confronted by the risen Jesus, and Jesus says, the guy I've chosen to be my apostle or my messenger to the Gentiles, kings and Jews, is in town. He's blind, and you got to go baptize him and heal him from his blindness. That was the risen Jesus. Paul went in. Go ahead. Yeah. We always think, and think in error, I think, that Jesus went back, was after he rose from the dead and spent 40 days, that he ascended into heaven and never came back. But he is in a glorified body that transcends time and space, and he has come back at least 3 times so far in the book of Acts. And I'm not certain he's not here this time, even though it's referred to an angel. What does angel mean? Messenger. So it may be. Angle means angle. Angel means messenger. Wasn't worthy enough. Yeah. Let's go ahead. You're gonna make the exact same point I was about to. So go ahead. Yeah. He was a consummate Jew. And so, he was on his way to kill Christians when Jesus appeared to him. Yeah. That's the job of angels, right? So it was either angel or Jesus, but same end. It was a confrontation or a display of God's power, and there was the direction. Here, do this. I'm a little bit afraid when I have things appearing to me telling me to do things. I just want to put that out there. Well, I'm going to say it was Christophany. Right, correct. Yeah, angel of the Lord is very specific. Right. But that's not the verbiage we have here. We have when the angel who spoke to him had departed. Probably it's not Jesus. Probably it is just an angel. But there is loosely room, I think, in the text to make it Jesus. But it probably isn't. Verse 7. When the angel, not angle, who spoke to him had departed, he called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier from among those who attended him. And having related everything to them, he sent a message to Joppa. What jumps out at you in those 2 verses? There was another devout soldier. He wasn't the only one. I get the mental image. If he is actually the first spear, if he's actually the leader of the 6 centuries of troops, and there are others that he has been working with them, can you imagine in their barracks at night where the other soldiers don't know, a few of them gathered for Bible study? Risking their lives doing it, but that's kind of the sense I get from what's being said here. Yes. It's very likely. I think in the book about the author of the Gospel of Luke in the book of Acts, done by LaHaye and Jenkins, the writers of Left Behind series also did a series of books on the gospel writers, and they are They are factual in as much as what we know about their background. When they're talking about Luke, they're describing that Cornelius was the soldier at the foot of the cross, that surely this man is the Son of God. We don't know if that's true. He could have been, yeah. That was 3 years earlier. He may have been rotated out, or he may have been a long-term posting. We just don't know. It's neat to think of. He came to know the Lord he stabs the Lord while he's on the cross, and blood and water comes out, and surely this was the Son of God. And now is back at his post. As first spear, that might have been his job. We don't know. It's neat to speculate, though, that he came to know the Lord that way. And I find interesting that he has others on the inside with him that are also believers. Verse 9. The next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour to pray. Well, prayer is at specific times was not commanded in Scripture. The Pharisees had made it an acceptable practice. At least twice, often 3 times a day. Regimented prayer. You go to Muslim areas today, and you can hear that. It's haunting. The first morning that I woke up in Amman, Jordan, and you could hear the prayers going out, it's kind of haunting. Have you heard it? It is like, this is really different than the world that I live in, and it kind of sets you, at least set me. I would say it differently, because Muslims come 600 years after. So Islam, they will not admit this, but Islam is based on Christian and Jewish ritual. They hate us. They want us dead. Yeah, they don't eat pork. Who does that sound like? They pray 3 times a day. Who does that sound like? Or 5 times a day. Who does that sound like? Jews. So they've adopted a lot of what comes from our background, and that's part of their world. But they won't admit that. Yeah. And I look at it that Jews and Muslims don't eat pork is okay, because that's more for me. Probably not the way to look at it, but no, he was where was Peter at this point? Yeah. The next day, as they were approaching the city, Peter went up to the housetop. Who was approaching the city? The 2 men sent by Cornelius. So they're approaching the city. Esther's getting confused. No, he wasn't yet. He hadn't yet responded, because they hadn't gotten to him. So here's this. Yes, that's it. So as they're approaching, Peter's on the rooftop praying. I've always fascinated at this statement, knowing where he was. He was at a tanner's house, a ceremonially unclean house, but he was on the rooftop praying, which is an interesting deal to me. In my pea brain, that's kind of interesting. And he became hungry and wanted something to eat, but while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance. Remember that word, trance. And he saw the heavens opened, and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its 4 corners upon the earth. In it were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air. So Peter's on the rooftop praying. He's hungry, and he goes into a trance. He's not asleep. He's not dreaming. The word trance, as it appears, is the Greek word ekstasis, which literally translated means being put out of place. So when I look at that and I take the literal translation of that, and I forget what our English word trance makes me think of, what does if I had written the verse out that while he was on the rooftop praying, he was put out of place and saw a sheet coming down with all sorts of animals on it, what would you conclude? It's a four-letter word, starts with P and ends with F. He was poofed. The literal translation of the word says he was put out of place. I think he experienced literally, not in a dream, he experienced literally a different time and space. Kitty! And so I'm going to conclude there. And we'll pick it up here next week when we can see being put out of place. Any questions? We're through, where are we through? We're through 12. Any questions so far? I know I've kind of rambled this morning. And no, that's not an appropriate time for you to say amen. I did have a good angle on it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, because that didn't make them unclean because they were in the process of worship during that. Simon the tanner wouldn't have been prohibited from worship. He just would have to go through a process and be verified or certified by the priest before he could go into the temple. No, Peter wasn't a tanner. Peter was a fisherman. Because everything that an unclean person touches while they're unclean is unclean, and everything Peter touches that was unclean made Peter unclean. It was that specific. Right. Yeah, the house never was clean. It may have been clean. Guilt by association, yes. And that's specifically the way the Levitical law works. That's part of the mystery to me. Why did Peter, who prided himself on being a really good Jew, why did he stay at a place that was ceremonially unclean? And then on top of that, get the message that he got of the stuff on the sheet. Go ahead and eat pork and shrimp and stuff like that. To me, it all plays together. It might be, and some claim that Simon was a Gentile. I don't. I think he was a Jew. And you had to have those kinds of people, even though that meant they were ceremonially unclean. That meant they had to go and get ceremonially clean in order to worship. And I think it heightens or expands the message of what Peter finds when he's being put out of place. I think it adds to that. Thank you, Father, for allowing us to spend some time in your word. We look forward to the service to follow where you were honored and glorified and we can fellowship together and worship you as well. Thank you, Father, for all that you do for us. Thank you for loving us and calling us to be your children. We look forward to all that you have for us in the future. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.